And we are live. I don't think I like this music as much.
It's a little like Cloud Kingdom.
Zelda?
Like I'm in a Final Fantasy overworld.
I don't think I'm as big of a fan.
It's not getting me hype. It's not Surge. This is Serenity, and it's like
Serenity.
I don't feel pumped up.
All right, we are live. Good morning. It is Social Surge with Fly and Mo. I'm Mo Regalado, and she is Fly Jamerson, and we are here to talk to you about all of your social stuff and how you can implement. Wow, that was a really bad fade out. I'm gonna have to fire my producer.
We have to axe the Serenity. Okay, I just want to admit that I fully have a problem, and I want to show you what it is. I have my Crexy water bottle. I have my Trep, and I have iced coffee in here, and I got my hot coffee and my Kush Wake.
Nice. That is very, very nice.
We're rocking the trip. It's the fact you can see the steam. It's the fact that I have the hot coffee and the iced coffee.
Well, you know, eventually the hot coffee will be iced coffee. So
how do I drink it fast?
Good morning, Regalado Real Estate. Thanks for joining us over on the Gram. Happy to have the Gram fam here. Happy to have everybody here. Happy Tuesday. We are talking about AEO hashtags. Can you really say hashtag? I always have to say hashtags, like hashtags.
Hashtags. My dad just texted me, "Are you on?" I'm like, "Yes, we're on."
Dr. Fromage. Yes, Dr. Fromage. Okay, so this is just a little bit way too much information, but yesterday my husband tried to kill me, so I'm just, I know he's sitting there. He's
what
like,
the heck?
What are you doing? So no, my husband's amazing. Always makes us brunch. We eat it's probably not even brunch. Good morning, Eric Odin. Thanks for joining us on the Gram. And we had Polish dogs from Costco, and like, I didn't think anything of it. And then it was kind of greasy, and I was like, oh yeah, yesterday was very, 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 there's nothing says happy Monday like a little bout of food poisoning.
Oh, so. Moser moment.
Yeah. And there was no pictures of it though.
Yeah, I mean, like, do you want to be memeified? It's a choice. You know what I mean?
It was, yeah. I was dying yesterday. I was just like, yep, we're done. We're done for the day. This is it. This is my life now. But thankfully, I'm very thankful for Pepto-Bismol and charcoal pills. So there's your little bit too much of information. So we are talking about AEO and hashtags. In fact, I sent Fly, I've sent her a story on Instagram yesterday from a person who I follow, and you guys are more than welcome to follow her. I got to find her now again. Her name is her account is Jen's Trends. And we've been talking about hashtags for a while, particularly on Instagram, because originally, like I do get asked a lot, like,
yeah,
why are we still using hashtags? What's the point? Should we use hashtags? So originally, when you were on Instagram or other platforms, particularly like X, when it was Twitter, you used hashtags to either go with trending content or stuff, or to have somebody find you. So basically looking at hashtags as a search tool, right? If we think about all social media being just a giant search engine. At one point, yes, using a certain hashtag would allow you to get more reach. So, thinking 2015, 2016, you could put cats of Instagram on a hashtag, and all of a sudden you would pull up in the cats of Instagram feed, even if your content had nothing to do with cats, right? The problem with that is that everybody found out about it. And this is probably way too much information, but
no, it's good. This is important.
A lot of porn bots and porn stars started using those trending hashtags to get their content seen. And so that was kind of the reason why, like, a lot of those hashtags got shadow banned. And they say there's no such thing as a shadow ban. Yes, there is. Like, it exists. And so this is where you had to get a little bit more unique. And so now thinking about hashtags, instead of thinking them as a way to boost your reach, you really need to start thinking about them in an SEO and AEO type of way.
Define those.
What was that?
Define those. What are those?
Oh.
Tell me what they are. I mean, I know what they are, but just like for the people.
Yeah. So AEO is either, there's different definitions for this, right? So it's either app engine optimization. So when we're talking about apps, like I was saying, every social media platform is a search engine. Or you can think about it, answer engine optimization, which is happening with your AI right now, right? So we're looking at AI as more being our answer engine, more so than Google, more so than any of the other platforms. In fact, I think it was last month that ChatGPT actually overtook Google in the amount of searches that are done on it. And this is why it's important that when you're putting your content out on social media, that you actually have to have relevant keywords, right? You can use hashtags, but it plays together. So obviously SEO is search engine optimization. AEO is either app engine optimization or answer engine optimization. And then you have your hashtags. Hashtags now, when we're thinking about social media, you really have to think about a hashtag being more of a way to categorize your content. So yes, it's fun to make up our own hashtags, but if nobody's looking or searching for that hashtag, they're never going to find it. So that's kind of what I want to talk about today, and how you can actually implement a good strategy to help get your content further reach. And we, as always, we welcome comments. So more than happy to answer questions or anything like that. So when we think about AEO, right? So if it, like, think about if you were to tell a friend that you want a red dinosaur, right?
Go on.
You could use your search to look up red dinosaurs, and then your feed would be filled with red dinosaurs, right?
But
it's a way.
like this.
If you think about it that way, you can use AEO and hashtags as a way to find that red dinosaur, right? It's a way for your content to be found easily by your clients. Adam Mosseri, who is, if you don't know who he is, he's the head of Instagram. He has said he's actually kind of walked back on this. So I think it was back in October, he was telling people, don't put more than 5 hashtags in an Instagram post. It is recommended on LinkedIn that you don't use more than 3 or 4. And so now back to Instagram, what I think it was Sprout Social came out with. They do really good reports every year. And one of the reports that they did, it was like they went through 30 million posts. It was like a lot. Yeah, it was a lot of posts. And they categorize, like, if you have over 1 million followers, you don't need like a bunch of hashtags, like 3 to 5 is fine, right? And then it broke it down. So for most of our commercial real estate brokers who are on Instagram, they're not going to have those tens of thousands of followers, right? But even for I think it was anything less than 50,000, you should be using between 20 and 30 hashtags. So it's still relevant. And thinking about it from the answer engine optimization or the app engine optimization, if you are a Boston multifamily broker, that is the hashtag that you're going to want to use. Or maybe I sell multifamily Boston, or multifamily whatever your industry is, whatever your area that you live in is. That's how you should be thinking of hashtags, right? As a way to categorize your content. So let me go back to what Adam Mosseri said. He said he didn't want people using hashtags that they are not going to help with boost reach. Totally get that. And there's a whole reason why he said all this, and it's because of that answer engine optimization. If you are putting in relevant keywords in your copy, copy is the words that you put in the post, right? You need to be able, that a search engine needs to be able to go in there and find those words. If you're not putting in enough copy, it's not going to find those posts. You can, so again, looking at some of the clients, Beth Azor, the Massimo Group, Bob Knackle, right? If you were to Google their names, their social profiles are going to pop up, right? Or if you look at some of the hashtags that they use, those social profiles will pop up with that information. This goes off to another side note. If you're a commercial real estate broker and your profile on Instagram is private, you are not helping anyone. And by that, I mean, if your profile, you are sharing your listings, you're sharing your life, you're doing any of that stuff, and if it's private, it's not being found. Like, the search engines are not going to be able to find your content. So you're literally like, why? Why? If it's just for you and your family, by all means. But if you're trying to use it for commercial real estate, you're trying to use it for any business, why would you have it private? It boggles my mind. It makes absolutely no sense. If you have stuff on there that you don't want people to see, start another account. Now, I would argue with you if you have like 2,000 followers, I'd be like, no, you don't need to start another account. But if you don't want people seeing your stuff, then maybe you should archive the stuff that's not business. You don't lose it, you just archive it and it goes off your feed. So there's a lot of options, right? I always recommend staying with an account versus trying to build from scratch, because building from scratch is, while it can be done, it is time consuming.
It's tough.
It is tough. So think about hashtags now on the social platforms as not as a way to gain reach and not to be seen, but as categorizing and as labels, right? So when people actually do a search, that content pops up. Yeah, go ahead. I'm talking way too much.
Yeah, that's okay. So one of my biggest beefs with hashtags in general is the lack of the ability to attribute traffic to it. So like there are some platforms, and depending on the analytics tools that you use, where you can look specifically at like, yes, how is a hashtag performing?
Yep.
But there are so many variables as to why a post would perform well. Hard quotations around that, right? Because there's so many different metrics to look at. There's so many different ways that a post that will end up performing. And I don't think people are looking hard enough at every single variable. So it's like, when you are deciding what hashtags to use, 100% look for things that are specific to your niche. Maybe you want to target some larger, broader categories too, like hashtag commercial real estate, hashtag Boston multifamily, whatever, right? But I do also want people to look at what the other posts in those feeds, in those categories, are doing, right?
100%.
Which is why, like we say, like, don't just make up a random hashtag, right? If you build up enough posts over time in a hashtag feed, like, right, maybe it will have more impact, more effect. But if you're doing, if you're doing a hashtag and there's no traffic to it, it's difficult for me to justify that as a strategy that will increase. It's not, I don't like increase indexing.
Right. So I'm going to push back a little bit on that, and only in the respect of, if we're looking at it being an app engine optimization or answer engine optimization, if it's a specific hashtag, so say it's your first and last name and industrial, right? Or something to that effect, where if people were if people were searching for your specialty in your town, that might not be a trending hashtag and there might not be any traffic to it. But if you're putting that inconsistent not inconsistently, but if you're putting it in space consistently, then I think that's going to, I would say that would start pulling up on the general search engines as well as the answer engines. And again, when I'm talking answer engines, I am talking about AI. I'm talking about ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, all of those things. So I would push back just a smidge on that, because I think if you're putting very specific, like your first name, last name, and the asset class that you work in, that could very well easily play into it. Now, it might not be trending and it might not be big on, obviously it's not going to be big on like the actual categorizing in the social platforms, but it's going to start pulling up organically. And when you and I talk about organic reach and we talk about organic social media, I think I'm just going to push back on that one just a little bit, a little bit.
Well, I think it's just important to, like, regardless of a push-pull, I think underneath all of this is really encouraging people to understand how these systems work and look at their entire ecosystem of how people eventually find them, right? There are apps, there are like TikTok, I think has like hashtags on TikTok are the most effective to me in the sense of, like, especially around the transparency around how TikTok shares how people are finding you.
Yeah.
But really thinking about how the app works and how people use the app. So and I think that one of the things I wanted to bring up as well is that the use case, the singular use case for hashtags that I am 100% behind is anything that's related to, I'm not going to say current event, but like a particular happening. So like ICSC 2025, SIOR, like whatever the particular event hashtags, if there is an event hashtag, if there is a trending topic or live happening in the industry that people are interested in looking at, that is a singular time that I would 100% always tagging associated with that. Because like, once again, people are already going to be looking for that because they have FOMO, and you will show up in addition to all of the other ways that you're codifying and categorizing your content by using hashtags. That is a particular use case where people, I think, would actually go on and search for a specific hashtag. I don't see a lot of, outside of search, which I think that looking specifically at optimizing for search and answer versus optimizing for in-platform use, I don't see a lot of people using hashtags within the apps in general to find things, because the algorithm has gotten so good at giving you content it already knows what you want. So I think that thinking about that in the way that you're trying to encourage people to think about it is what they should be, how they should be using hashtags. Jim has a great question.
Jim has a good question. Is there platforms where hashtags are not effective? I think when we talk about it, when we look at it from a category, how am I going to say that word? Categorization aspect, standpoint, whatever. That was a hard word to say this morning. I wouldn't use them on X anymore. That might be the only platform that I probably wouldn't be using them.
I would say that, minus the situation I just described. Possibly.
Correct. So back in the day, pour one out. Okay. When we were, when you only had 140 characters on Twitter to actually make a statement, using a hashtag actually pulled you up on the right-hand side of the feed, where they used to have all the trending hashtags right there. Right. And so you would click on, like, if there was breaking news or something was happening. And so a lot of people would jump on the trending hashtags and they would use those to show up in those feeds. And that, your content literally had nothing to do with what was going on. Now, I would never recommend that you do that because it's not relevant and nobody's paying attention to you and you're just trying to get fake engagement. But that was a strategy that a lot of people employed then. If I'm remembering correctly, what the notes have come out about X and about how their whole algorithm works, I'm pretty sure that hashtags don't work anymore, which is weird because they still have trending hashtags. Like that's still a thing on there. But I'm thinking it's more of the algorithms looking at the words that are trending and they're using that instead, right? I could be absolutely, completely 100% wrong. But if I remember correctly, with all the notes that came out, I think it was earlier last year or late last year, where the programmers were, or not programmers, but people were releasing information. I have actually the thread saved on
on X. Yeah, I think it was late last year and also earlier this year as well.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking hashtags are not as relevant on X at all, just because of the way that it has been adjusted for the algorithm. Now, if you had asked me 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I would have said yes, you should be using no more than 3 hashtags on X, right?
One of the things that I want to highlight about what you just said that I think is important is that 2 years ago it was completely different. And 2 years from now, it's going to be completely different.
Correct.
And it was originally put in place because there was not the level of search or algorithm or categorization, that word,
right,
or anything on these apps. And so we have like a legacy feature that does not come from the current way that these apps work. So what I really want to highlight as sort of an underscore to all of this is that what are they actually going to find when they get to your content? Like, regardless of how they got there, they searched, they found a hashtag, you were pushed to the top of the feed because of it, whatever. Once again, what they actually find when they find you is arguably more important than that particular tactic. I think that I think that looking at the app specifically, thinking about how you use it, how you find your own stuff is something that's important to consider. And I think that looking at places like Metricool, Sprout Social, some of these other, larger firms that are looking, at the industry at large and like social media, right? And it's also tough too, because the marketing I see on social media that gets the kind of reach that people think about when they're trying to employ these strategies or these tactics on a granular level, like it's not the same thing. People in our industry are in B2B sales. It is very different when you're approaching social media as a product marketer, right? And so I think a lot of the strategies too that we see when we look at these larger firms doing this research is applicable to an ecosystem that we're actually not a part of.
Correct.
So the content underneath the content that the hashtag leads to, looking at the larger industry trends and practices like within our specific niche and not just social media at large. And then it's interesting, the question of like, is there a platform where hashtags are not effective? There's so much like you and I have already said, there's so many different strategies. There's so many different ways to approach this. There's so many different things to think about. One thing I don't see people thinking or talking about enough when they're using hashtags is, again, how does it actually impact the way that the information is received in the messaging? So one thing that puts me off is when, and I mean, like I do it sometimes and I'm guilty of it, but it's something that I see a lot that just needs to be stopped, is when people will write their copy and, it's just like a regular text post. And then there's like 10 or 15 hashtags littered throughout.
Yep.
I think that is a mistake on like a purely design level, because you're making it harder. Every time you put a hashtag in the middle of a sentence, it's going to pull the person out of the sentence a little bit because they're going to be looking at the fact that it's a hashtag.
Right.
And then just sort of everything that comes with that, which is another argument that I hear a lot is like, if you put 30 hashtags, you're doing that about the optimization and the platform and the reach. And it's not actually about what you're communicating. And people sometimes have an optic reaction to that. They're like, so there's so many things to consider when you're thinking about the efficacy of hashtags, and so much of how you use it depends on kind of where you're at, I think, in the process. You see Gary Vee, drop a post with no hashtags. He also doesn't have to because he has like 5 million followers or whatever, right? But there's so much to consider. There's so many variables to look at. And so this is the last thing I'll say. I'm going to get off my soapbox. Is you can't just slap a hashtag on something and think it's going to get you the result that you want.
Correct. Because as we're talking about, hashtags are not about reach anymore. They're about categorization and how it's categorizing your content on any given platform, right? So hashtags are not meant for reach. They're not going to boost your visibility. However, they will boost your searchability. There we go. That's the way we need to look at it. And the last but not least, before we pop off, yo. I want to mention one last little thing, which I just said I was going to do. And that's when you're putting images on any of these apps. If you really want to blow someone's mind, start putting some alt text into the images that you put on there, right? So alt text is super important. This is another way for you to actually utilize. And I know I'm probably going to get slapped down by somebody like, that's not what it's for. Yeah, whatever. Use the alt text as a way for search engines to find your content, right? So alt text on images. Why do we have alt text on images? Because as of right now, as far as I know still, most search engines cannot actually see images. So if your website is super heavy with images and you haven't alt text any of those images, then all it's reading is the text on your website. So all of this beautiful space that you've taken up on your website with these images, the search engine's not reading that. All it's seeing is that it's an image and then it's going to go to the text. So that's the importance of alt text. It's also important to do it on social because, again, if you don't have copy and you have these great photos of your sexy warehouse in Indiana,
Indiana warehouses are a little sexy. Go on.
That'll be the hashtag, sexy warehouse Indiana. But if you put that in the alt text, like this is a warehouse, how many square feet, where it's located in Indiana, that's going to now be searchable by the search engines. It's going to be searchable by the apps. It's going to be searchable by, your AI. So last but not least, if you're still using hashtags, yes, please still use them. Don't do like 25 on LinkedIn, no more than 3. You can do up to 30 on Instagram, but remember, it's not going to increase your reach. It's not going to boost your reach. It's a way for you to categorize your content. If you guys have any more questions about hashtags or social media, thanks, Jim. We appreciate you being here. We'll be back here on Thursday talking about something else. We have no idea what we're talking about. I'm sure we'll figure it out. And if you have questions, both Fly and I are available on all the platforms. All right, everybody. Have a good day. We'll see ya.